My name is Amanda Ring, and this is Flight of the Feminine. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark. To awaken your womb and heart consciousness, I'm inviting you to open to the realms of energy and spirit, to evoke empowerment and create sovereignty. As a sacred soul, each one of you are on this journey through life. Setting the intention to really open the hearts of the listeners to new ways of seeing their own inner world and how the outer world is influencing that, and how we can work to create a healthier balance, new ways, new solutions, more loving presence in the world. That would be my intention in sharing this today. Would you like to add anything, Tara?
Yeah. Just welcoming in my ancestors. Fortune, Ashan, Shinsher. May I be a voice for you in this time together with Amanda, and may my voice be of service to the hearts and souls who will be listening. May the ancestors be felt in this space. May the wise grandmothers come through in the ways in which they want to be heard. Nai Bonani, Moyeo, Forcha, Shanwahan the Krina, Benakti. Thank you.
Falcha, thank you. And also acknowledging that we were both sharing from the Great Mother, the lands of Danu and of Gaia, and of the unceded territories of our Indigenous families. So here is the unceded territories of the Migamagi people, and I believe you're on the Arapaho lands. So we acknowledge our connection. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. So, in our last episode, we explored what I called worthiness traps, and I coined the phrase borrowed unworthiness in reference to how our perceptions around worth and worthiness can get handed down through family lineage and societal influence, in particular, how patriarchal conditioning has created an internalized habit of externalizing your worth. There is so much about this topic to explore. And if worthiness is something you bump up against and you haven't had to listen to that episode yet, I do encourage you to go back and take some time to listen. And I've included some journal prompts for you if you feel called to explore in that way and really take the time to go inward and explore this. And today, we are going to take this patriarchal lens, the concept of worthiness, and dive deeper into the impact of this for women and the matriarchal lines within our families. I have a very special guest joining me to share in both this tender and evocative topic. Tara Brading joins us today, and I am so honored and delighted that she is with us. I follow Tara's work closely, and her work is so dear to my Celtic and ancestral heart. Tara and I have also both moved through the Moon Mana Celtic Women's Circle Training with Dr. Karen Ward in the past, and Karen was on Flight of the Feminine a few episodes ago, so you can check that out as well. And I had the most beautiful and powerful healing experience with Tara in her Matriarchal Medicine Carriers Live course, probably a year or so ago. And that is still reverberating through my bones. And it has led to deep healing work with my mother and with the ancestral ones, and both my paternal and my maternal lines. And I'm very emotional even now, just speaking of it. Even before we came on the call, I had tears coming because it's such powerful, important work for all of us to open to. So I'm going to share a little bit more about Tara. And then if there's anything she would like to add, she'll hop in. And then we're going to kind of unveil a few terms that may, for some of the listeners here, be new, or they may be familiar, but there's not a depth of understanding of what they are. And for others, it's a refresh. You know, here we are gathering in the equinox energies. This is being recorded in that portal. So refreshing our heart lenses, our perceptions around things is a beautiful time to be doing that now with these changing energies. Tara is a women's educator, a storyteller, and a songstress, focusing on uplifting nature-based feminine wisdom and ancestral teachings from Ireland and England. She's been on a journey of remembering and reclamation for over a decade, honoring the earth-based feminine wisdom left in her blood and bones. She is the creator of The Roundhouse, which is an online community that lovingly guides women into nature-based feminine wisdom from the Irish traditions. She is also the creator of The Grail Priestess, a deep dive program that guides women into heartfelt connection with their English heritage. She also runs a variety of other courses, events, and workshops that serve thousands of women every year. And I can certainly attest to the power of that work. I know that you also journey to Ireland and England regularly on pilgrimage and on journeys of opening to the wisdom of what the ancestors want to birth through you now. And so, but you are coming to us from your current home space and land that you steward in Colorado, where you shared with me that this is the lands of the Ute and Arapaho people, and maybe you can correct me on the name of the First Peoples.
And Ute and Arapaho.
Ute and Arapaho. Okay, it wasn't familiar to me, so thank you. And so this is in the Colorado area of the United States. Just before I open up to you to share, Tara, I just want to say that to me, you are a sister, a mentor, a leader of the really essential reclamation of the matriarchal medicine and the feminine wisdom ways. So I'm very moved to have you here today. So thank you. Thank you so much. Is there something else you might like to share in your journey that I didn't touch upon in your introduction?
No, you did a beautiful job, and I'm so honored to be here with you and to feel the potency of the ancestral medicine that you carry, which I've been a mentor to you, but that is your medicine that you carry. And this medicine is accessible to all of us. And so I hope that those of you who are listening will feel a small piece of that, will begin to ignite that within you by listening to this conversation. And I also just want to presence that I'm really here in service to my ancestors and to be a voice for them. And within that, I surrender to the mystery of whatever we're going to talk about today. We obviously have a theme, but they may want to change course.
That's right.
Yes, honoring that.
Yes, honoring that for sure. And I'm sure many of our listeners will also be feeling different things surface within themselves as they connect with the words, the intention, the energy of this episode. And so I just invite all of you that are listening to make sure that you are also creating space if emotions come up, and if there's something that becomes very apparent for you that wasn't in your awareness before, and to go to your support systems and to journal and to go out to nature, and really receive the support from the first mother to all of us, the great mother. Yeah. So welcome, welcome. And when I was exploring the whole topic of worthiness, it was bringing me back to the work that I explored with you, with the matriarchal medicine carrier. And also, it's so prevalent in the work that I do with Seven Feathers and the women that I support, the ancestral work that I've been doing. And my lineage is rooted in the Celtic Isles and England and Scotland and Ireland, and the Germanic tribes is where my energetic and blood connections are. So it really brought me to this current life, and how women, two great impediments for women's full expression of themselves in their lives, seems to be such a prevalent pattern of self-doubt and a lack of worth, or a perception of unworthiness. And this always leads me through all of this into how the patriarchal conditioning has just seeped in and seeped through our lineages and our experiences as women, and how that's become also internalized, and the whole concept of misogyny, how that internalized misogyny has also been, perpetuating this sense of separation within the sisterhood, and separation from our worth. And so I think it's really important that these terms get used, and maybe some people aren't familiar with them. Like, we've heard the term patriarchy, and in an earlier episode, I spoke of that, of course, and probably mentioned it in a few, and want to help educate, as I'm educating myself, that the patriarchy isn't something that is anti-men. It is a systemic set of orders or rules. It's a system of oppression for the purpose of division and control. And there's different tactics that the patriarchy tends to utilize. And it is very familiar with us in more Western culture where we're rooted, but certainly it's been insidious in where the Western culture has spread itself out across the world, which I feel my spirit bumps just running, and that is where colonialism comes in, and which I know is something that is dear to your heart. So I'll speak just on the basics there of patriarchy, and perhaps you want to lead some more learning around the colonial and patriarchal bridging. And I guess the tactics that I see showing up that have become internalized within the individual, that we know is present in the collective, is this divide and conquer, the tactics of comparison and competition, of shame and guilt, fear-based tactics, and within those, that there is a need to comply, to be compliant. And if there isn't compliance, there's punishment. And on the deepest level of the soul work and human experience, is the greatest punishment is ostracization and separation from love and belonging. And the deep psyche, that is what's felt by so many who are unaware that these imprintings are influencing how they view themselves and how they operate in their life. So would you like to share some more about that and about the colonial component? I know that's really fresh in your heart right now, and I'm very open to how the river of this conversation moves.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate what you were sharing about patriarchy as a system of oppression. And it's an interlocking system with colonialism and white supremacy. And these systems all work together. And, as a white woman, I both benefit from and am harmed by those systems. And that is true for not just white women, but for many different kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this deep underlying energy of what you spoke to, of domination and control. And I've come to understand this deeper energy as predatory energy. And when I say predatory energy, I'm not talking about natural predators like wolves or what have you. I'm talking about predator with a capital P, this like...
intentional.
Yes, this very intentional and unnatural, I would say, way of trying to assert domination and control and taking more than one needs. The natural predator only takes what it needs. And then it's in balance, it's in harmony. So this predatory energy that's underneath all those systems of supremacy is harming all of us, right? This predatory energy doesn't have a gender, a class, a race. It is something, it's almost like an archetypal energy. It has a spirit that can come into all of us in different ways. And again, we can be harmed by this energy, and we can also collude with this energy through force or through choice. And so this predatory energy has been very present for me lately. The first time I heard about the archetype of the predator was in Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book, Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Yes.
Such a powerful book for anyone who hasn't read it.
Yep. I'll put it in the show notes. So there's a reference. Yeah.
Yes. That was the first time I heard about that as an archetypal energy. And then I received some teachings from a mentor last year, Miranda Pretty Owl, who I want to honor in this moment. And she received some of those teachings from an Indigenous man called John Trudell, who has teachings about this predatory energy and speaks a lot about it. He's a poet and activist. And so through these different threads, I've really come to understand the predator in both a mythic way. I'm very interested in story, and we can understand a lot through story and through myth, and also just being out in the world and seeing what's happening in our world right now on a mass scale, and really coming to, open my eyes to the ways in which we as women, since we're talking about women here, have been indoctrinated to be the colonial patriarchal daughter. And this is really like the heart of the work that I am offering, is how do we unravel ourselves from that identity as the colonial patriarchal daughter? How has this predatory energy come through our lineages? How has it come to us through misogyny and through patriarchy, but also through colonialism? And so there's all these interweaving threads, which I'm sure we'll explore. I think I'll pass back to you, Amanda. But yeah, that it feels important to honor all of these threads and the nuance and the complexity of these systems of supremacy and the ways that we've been harmed by them. And we've also colluded with them. Yeah.
Certainly we have. And some in unassuming and unaware ways, and others in aware ways, but not understanding the underpinnings.
Yes.
Of what is actually happening, because it's been presented as quote unquote a normal way to operate and to enact choice, which is, as you've mentioned, is actually quite not a natural way. It is something that has actually been created rather than a natural part of the ecosystem, right?
Yes.
So thank you for, opening that up. And what I'm also hearing is how what is happening right now, I feel, and you're a key participant in this, is the old fabric that this is where all this these old threads have been woven together. That fabric is in a phase of disintegration, and it is actively being torn apart. and it is also in its natural death cycle. We are moving into a very different state energetically. And what I understand and what I want to be an active part of in the flight of the feminine and inviting you here and all the work that I'm doing is the reweaving. It's the reweaving of a new fabric that is based on love and on sovereignty and for all people. And yes, there is a focus on women in many of these episodes. And as I say in most of the episodes too, that that this is for all genders and all people who resonate with the energy of what I'm speaking about and what others are sharing with us. But we do need to acknowledge the level at which the feminine and the feminine within all genders has been so suppressed, repressed, imprisoned, vilified, and how that has created the world we are in now. And that now it's time for the reweaving, remembrance of the medicine that's always been there, the wisdom that's always been there. So the term misogyny is one that I know when I've used that in circle with women or in gatherings or even one-on-one with women has, there's been a little bit of confusion in the eyes and the hearts of the women around actually what that means. And so I'd like just to share for the listeners too that another sort of synonymous term is sexism. That's a little more common that people would have heard, but it is more than just sexism, which is, creating this inequality or minimization of the feminine in comparison to another gender or the masculine. And with misogyny, it's important to understand that is taking these stereotypes that have been created through the lenses of the patriarchal and colonial influence of women being passive and weak, incapable of intellectual prowess, having a capacity for strong leadership. There's a whole list of these indoctrinated stereotypes of what the archetypal role of the feminine must be. And we could have a whole other conversation about how religious doctrine has influenced that as well. But really that the sense of a misogynistic tone is one whereby women are seen as less than, if we were to just distill it down to one thing. And then the internalization of that misogyny is women believing those stereotypes to be true, and then orienting their self, their beliefs, their perceptions, their perceived potential in accordance to those stereotypes, and then having so much internalized conflict. And with that comes an immense shadow of doubt, constant doubt, right? And that's what dominance also does to those that do not align, even subconsciously, to what the rules of the dominance and compliance are, because there's a felt sense of it not being aligned, a felt sense of feeling preyed upon, and there's a constant fear. I know in my own experience, and many of the women that I connect with, this sense of internalized misogyny is like when they start to realize it, it's like cold water on their face, like waking up from a dream where there was so much that they have consciously and unconsciously allowed to happen in their lives and to happen within themselves, how they've limited themselves, how they have minimize their own presence, their own vitality, and how they've lived in this sense of fear. So I feel like I'd love this conversation to move in a way where we are helping to educate women to recognize some of these things, and then to have compassion and space to feel it, and to allow perhaps the dormant rage that might be there to surface around it, to allow the grief that has happened, and also to recognize how this may have been impacting their matriarchal lines, and how they've been mothered, and how this dominance, this compliance, these patriarchal and colonial influences have bled through the psyches of the mothers in our lines. Would you care to speak to that, Tara?
Yeah, this internalized misogyny, sexism, unworthiness, shame that's been imprinted into us, it is not ours. And yet it can take up so much of our experience of who we are and how we live our lives and how we experience the world, because the imprinting is so deep, right? And this influence, this imprinting, comes from different directions, right? So it comes from our external society, right? The ways in which we are shown what woman is supposed to be, right? In the eyes of the colonial patriarchal paradigm, this is who you're supposed to be. And it's very much a sense of, again, domination and control. Like, women are to be dominated and controlled. And so there isn't space in that system for our true sovereignty and vitality and medicine and value to come forth in meaningful ways. There's always we're always up against that wall, that cage that the predator wants us to stay in, right? So we see that reflected to us in the outside world, in our society, in our culture, what culture values, our culture values, and what have you. But actually, one of the most insidious ways that we receive this imprinting of unworthiness, shame, separation from self is through our families and through our lineage. And this comes to us from both mother and father. But the ways that it comes through mother are so, so insidious and so painful, because it's the internalized misogyny that transfers down to us as daughters. Because, as children, we're looking to mother to understand what is woman, right? And so when we see our mothers who are unable to fully embrace their sovereignty and their true expression of self because of that imprinting, that cage that has come down through the generations, then obviously we take that on because we mirror our mothers, right? And so if your mother, those of you listening, is a woman who has not been able to embrace her true expression of womanhood, her true self, and whatever that means, then if she's put herself unconsciously, subconsciously in that cage of the colonial patriarchal daughter, then that is going to impact you. There's just no way around that.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's so important for us to look at that important relationship with mother and to really see with clear eyes the ways in which we've been imprinted by our mother's self-doubt, her unworthiness, her shame, her, all the things. We can go more into that, the details of that later, but I want to stay kind of high level in this moment. So looking at that core relationship, and then look at your mother's relationship with her mother, and then begin to understand that this is something that is intergenerational and something that is so systemic that, it's important to feel the rage of that and to feel the the disappointment that maybe your mother couldn't break that cage. She couldn't get out of that cage. Like, it's important to grieve and be angry about that personal, intimate relationship, but also to eventually come to a place of understanding that it's not really your mother's fault at a core level, nor was it her mother's or her mother's or her mother's, because this is something so systemic. And the predatory energy has been so dominant for so long that it hasn't been possible for women to break free of this. And so we are in this time of amazing transformation and change. And yet we must also keep our eyes open, because some of the ways that we think we're freeing ourselves are actually just keeping us in that cage. And we can talk more about that. But it's so insidious on so many levels that there's a lot of delayering that needs to happen. And so, I share this from a place of having deeply reckoned with these things. And of course, this is a continuing journey. The work is never done. But I've come to a place of deep acceptance, forgiveness, and understanding that has brought about a whole new relationship with my mother. And I'm so grateful for that. And I can also see the ripple effect with my grandmother and feel energetically the healing that's happening through the entire line. And I believe that, each woman in the lineage has a unique ancestral destiny. Each person does. But again, we're talking about women. So each woman has a unique ancestral destiny. And also, your mother may have done work that is really important for evolving the lineage that you can't quite see yet, or you might not ever be able to truly see. And so it's not that our mothers and grandmothers didn't do their work, because they might have, right? In ways that you can't understand because you're living in this time, in this incarnation, right? This generation. But there's so much medicine that come through the lineage in different ways. And so what's really true for me is that the deeper the reckoning, the deeper the remembering. And so as we reckon with these things and the ways in which we've, inherited these imprints, the more that we reckon with that, the more that we can remember the medicine of the lineage, the more that we can remember the wisdom of the women who've gone before us and the ways in which they stood against the predator, they stood against patriarchy, the ways that they fought to free us, the prayers that they brought forth to protect us, and really honoring that a lot of these dysfunctional coping mechanisms that come down to us and these limiting beliefs were a coping mechanism as a result of trauma and systemic oppression. So that is also so important to understand and see, right? So this remembering that can happen is really something that's so beautiful, something that I hope you experienced, Amanda, at Patriarchal Medicine Carriers. There's a deep remembering that it was not always this way. And there is so much we can tap into by connecting with our wise and well grandmothers. And everyone has wise and well grandmothers in their lineage. They might be really, really far back in your lineage, but they're there. And they're the ones who are standing beside us and behind us, who we're walking with. If you choose to intentionally connect with that, if you choose to walk with them in that intentional way, then there is this deep remembering, and they can help to bring forth the medicine, and we can help to bring forth the medicine that's needed for the entire lineage, right? So I think I'll stop there and pass back to you, Amanda.
Yeah. So many things are, of course, resonant in what you're sharing. I want to capture sort of three things. One is that when I returned to Nepal in 2018, and I had been there in 2000, and I was doing some pilgrimage there actually with a 7th generational Nepali shaman. And we were there during the 9-day festival of honoring Durga. And one of the things we spoke about in ceremony, and he highlighted, was that the deepest ancestral work we can do as all humans is the healing of the mother line. It's the mother wound for every human. And So that is so true. And I see that. I do work with some men as well and people of varying sexual orientation, that the mother connection is so key to the healing process, the re-embodiment of one's own essence. And the second piece I want to just piggyback on, where you're talking about how when there is the intent to move into this awareness of what has been handed down and allowing the pain of that to be processed, that deep remembering comes with it. And what I would add to that is the level of compassion that flows along with that, because the grief, the pain, the rage is not only our own that we're experiencing. It is the generations and generations of oppression and submission within that we are releasing, so that healing is happening for the lineage, as you're saying. And I too have had beautiful reshaping of the connection with my mother over time. And then that has extended into the relationship with my father and the mother experience in his lineage and the dovetailing of those together. So when we can really open to process, the first step is awareness, and then methods of process and recognition and reclamation within that is this beautiful reweaving on that individual level. And we can then have an emotional distance from what used to be a wave of triggers from our mothers. And it's not an emotional distance to protect. It's a space of self embodiment, of a truer essence of who we are, separate from all of that, and the wisdom that's gotten missed, that's allowed to now flow through and be present in our own lives. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to that from the compassionate level and how important this is in recognizing when we talk about sovereignty, that may be a term that's relatively new for some of the listeners as well, in the sense of how is that enacted as a woman. So I would speak to that in the sense of that we start to allow and open our voice. We peel the onion on, okay, this is a perception that I have and a belief that I have, and this is what I speak to. This is why I act this way. And why is that? And then we bring our voice forward without shaming ourselves, without reprimanding ourselves, and having grace around that we are actually trying to find our wisdom with all those layers peeled off. But if we've never even expressed things in a more free way, in that sovereign way, we can't see sometimes or hear our own internalization of something. So that having the courage to start opening our voice and sharing in personal conversation, and I'm speaking about actually talking and hearing our own words and hearing our own opinions. And then the second piece that I would invite to that is how that feels in our bodies, because that is part of the feminine principle, the feminine wisdom, is it's felt. It's not just thought, but it's felt. So when I'm speaking this, even though this is maybe what my family has always said, this is how I'm supposed to show up as a woman, or how I'm supposed to speak, or what I'm supposed to embody, but my body is saying, oh, it's constricting, or it's frightened even. So when we start to open our voices and explore what sovereignty is for us, we need to keep connection to the body. So I'm going to hand it back to you now to see if you'd like to share something in another tidbit for our listeners, because I know I'm aware that we have an Earth time container where we have another 10 minutes or so, and I'd love for it to be really tangible for our listeners.
Yeah. So what I feel that you're speaking to, Amanda, which is so important, is that we can't do this healing in our heads. It has to be somatic and deeply felt on a cellular level in our blood and our bones. And so that's why it's so important not to bypass all of those feelings you were speaking to around grief and rage. Like, we can't bypass these energies, right? And we might think of these energies, grief and rage and harmful patterns and what have you, as shadows, ancestral shadows and personal shadows. And by that, I simply just mean that these are aspects of self and lineage that are longing to be brought into integration. There's this fragmenting of self through those shadows. And so there's this longing for the shadows to be integrated and healed to an extent. Like, the shadows never go away. But we get better at dealing with triggers and bringing our medicine to the triggers, let's say with our mothers, or bringing the medicine to the ways in which we hold ourselves back in our lives by not speaking up, to hark back to your example. And because there's been so much shaming and silencing in the lineage, this is not something you can just do overnight. This is this is a path, something that you walk, something that you live, something that you feel. And so it requires deep work, right?
And I'd love to just jump in and add, that's why also sisterhood is so key to this path, because we need to know we're not alone in this unfurling, because it's not, it's like what I'm being given this image of this beautiful flower opening and all the ants running out and all of, what might have been caught inside that bud is also there. And I don't want to interrupt your flow of thought, but it's just speaking to me so strongly. That is why we're not meant to walk this alone.
Yes, exactly. Because essentially, because of the traumas that the women of our lineage have experienced, that has literally impacted their safety, right? So we all have sexual trauma in our lineage, right? That's one expression of unsafety, right? Literally being unsafe. Women being shamed and silenced, sometimes in very violent ways, right? Whether that's through domestic abuse or through rejection of society or what have you, right? And so there's these traumas that have created these imprints and have made it unsafe. And there's still that feeling of unsafety in our bodies. It's not safe for me to speak. It's not safe for me to stand in my true power, my true expression of self. It's not safe for me to be intimate with a partner. It's not safe for me to go out in the world and do my greatest work, right? Whatever it is, like, there's that feeling like it's not safe. And even though that's largely not true anymore, though of course it is still true in some cases, misogyny and violence are still very real, right? But that's where we have to reckon with, how do we create our own sense of safety?
Exactly.
How do we reprogram ourselves to feel safe when we're speaking our truth and what have you? And even though there still is that threat, which isn't as imminent or as dominant as it was in the past, but there still is that threat. But are we going to let that threat of the predator stop us from being who we truly are? And this is where we need courage and we need each other, because that's how we create this new sense of safety. Right. And so we have to create that inner safety within ourselves by doing this deep remembering and reckoning and reclamation work, and also doing it with others, because that's how we instinctually are going to feel safe, because we humans are programmed to be in community. And when we don't feel that we belong and we don't feel that we're in community and we don't feel that others have our backs, then we go into that shutdown mode of I'm not safe. Right. And so we spiral into that trigger. And so, go ahead, Amanda. I feel that you have something you want to share.
Yeah, it just was just coming through so strongly, and how our innate need and deep psychic, our deep psychic connection to community has gotten manipulated by the patriarchal and colonial agenda that has turned it into herd mentality, so that community has gotten, reshaped into this. You must belong to this uniform group that abides by these standards and these rules, and otherwise you're ostracized, which brings me back to that point I made earlier of this. Our deepest fear is to not be loved. We're so naturally designed to be in community, to be in connection with other, to be in connection with nature as an extension of community, as part of our kin. And so this separation, as we see in modern society, from nature, and all of these rules and regulations on how to be in the herd, otherwise you're left out of the herd, that can hearken to lots of ancestral traumas as well, when things were shaping early in the days of patriarchy and colonialism. So it just made me really just think about that. And this is not only a reparenting of self and restoring internal safety, it's restoring the true essence of community and connection. And when we are safe within, there's an inherent capacity to see and enact safety within community. And when women have internalized misogyny, it turns up in this toxic pattern of comparison against other women, and a jealousy and sabotaging self that starts to dissolve when there is a greater sense of internal safety. And that's a big part of the work that I do with women as well, around that re-embodiment of the physical vessel and safety with feelings, emotion, sensation, that somatic experience. But it's also the inner child work, where we reparent, where we remother. And so I would suggest to our listeners that if they're not familiar with that, that's something else to consider exploring, both the somatic aspect of the healing from internalized misogyny as part of that return of safety in the body, and also that connection to the inner child, the inner teen, the inner teenager. And that it is essential that you find community somehow, but community that also feels safe and is like-hearted in their awareness of there is another way than how we're relating to one another right now. I just really felt that we need to let that part of the fabric of the herd mentality move into dissolution as well, and have it return to the feminine nature of community and connection and interdependence and reciprocity and shared resources. Difference is important and essential to the technicolor whole of life, but to individuate to the point of separation from the whole is part of what the patriarchal lens has also led us down a path of, that individual against individual, rather than individuation being a part of the whole, and that all of our differences contribute to this beautiful tapestry of all of the resources and all that we can help and support each other with. So yeah, is there anything else you would like to share in addition to those few statements?
Yeah, just echoing and adding to some of what you shared there. There's this deep importance to strengthen both our individual selves and our relationship with others, right? To feel that interdependence and to reweave ourselves back into the web of life, which is a way of life that our ancient ancestors deeply embodied and understood. So this is where some of the medicine from our lineage can come through, is that remembering of how to be in relationship with, because at the root level of this predatory energy that I've been speaking of is separation and denial of relationships. And so this is such a huge process to heal this deep wound. It's like the deepest wound, collective wound that we carry, because of colonialism and patriarchy and also white supremacy, these interlinking systems. And yet, within that interdependence, we also have to have a very firm sense of self. Otherwise, we can get lost in, right? And we can easily fall into that herd mentality that you're speaking of. And so, for me, one of the biggest changes and initiations I've been through in the last year is one of my deepest fears used to be rejection, right? Rejection by others. And it's that very primal sense of like, if I'm rejected from my kin, from my clan and my kin, then I'm going to die. It literally, because that is so imprinted in our evolution, right?
Yes.
And I no longer feel that deepest fear anymore to the same degree that I did. There's an imprint still there, but it's not one of my deepest fears anymore. My deepest fear is not being in integrity with myself. And that has been a huge shift because by standing in my integrity, it naturally means that people are going to reject me. And I have to be okay with that.
Yes. Oh, this resonates so strongly, right?
And this is some of the deepest work I feel that we can do in our lineages, right? Because our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers and what have you, so many of them either weren't physically safe to stand in that integrity, that sovereignty that you spoke of. It physically wasn't safe, or they didn't have the tools, resources, support, what have you, to do that work, right? And so when we truly stand in our integrity, no longer afraid of being rejected, we'll naturally find the people and the kin that we're destined to be in community with, rather than trying to insert ourselves into a community because we feel that we need people, like we need to be accepted, we need to be loved. That's shadow, right? That's the shadow aspect of that. And I really have so much compassion. But that needing to be seen, needing to be loved, needing to be accepted, that's actually the patriarchal colonial imprinting.
Yes, I agree. And that leads me to just a couple more sentences here before we close the episode. I thank you for that, because that also what's coming to me is in that integrity, we are embodying our authenticity. And so when we can step into our authenticity, as that being the primary, purpose, we are stepping into the deepest space of courage that we can, because we are doing that regardless of the outcome, because we belong to ourselves, and our integrity and our knowing of ourselves. And I agree that many of our foremothers have not had that safety to even explore who they were authentically, and to be able to uphold a sense of integrity in a way that we now have the opportunity to do, in a way that has not been present to this point in time, in this concept of linear time. So that I feel is a big path for a lot of women and a lot of people listening, is also this connection to their authentic self. And within that, the integrity can grow, and the courage and the safety can grow to embody that and find others, like you said, to be okay to be with oneself, to love self first, to belong to self first. And that is belonging to the lineage in its whole. So that shadow aspect that you spoke of, is something that is a guiding light, really, for where we need to love and accept ourselves even more and more with all of it. So I thank you so much. I feel like we could take this in so many different directions, and I just appreciate your wisdom, your vulnerability, your tenacity, your devotion, all of which I resonate with. And I hope that the listeners have felt an inspiration, a deep recognition within themselves, and feel that there are resources, there are ways to reclaim and reweave. And I will definitely include the different resources connected to your offerings, as well as the book references. And I'll include some of the work of Bethany Webster as well, because I know both of us have followed her with the mother wound work. Before we have a closing remark from you, Tara, the next episode, I'm going to be bringing people into a connection with energy, their intuition, their own unique frequency, and the earth through an introduction to dowsing work. I call it divine dowsing for a reason, because so much of it is about how we begin to trust how spirit, how energy, how our soul speaks uniquely through us, and how we start to develop a relationship with that, and how everything has an energetic essence in life. So I look forward to sharing that with the listeners as well. And Tara, any closing remarks that you would like to share?
Yeah, just feeling my grandmothers here with me, and just them wanting to share that the grandmothers of your lineage, everyone who's listening, the grandmothers of your lineage, the wise grandmothers, the ones who are deeply healed and deeply well, who hold prayers for the lineage, who are guardians of your ancestral medicine and ancestral wisdom, they are longing so deeply to connect with you. And when you create this relationship, this connection, it will give you more strength than you could ever conjure on your own, so much more courage than you could ever have on your own. And this has been so key for me in that standing in my integrity and no longer being afraid of rejection, because I know that my grandmothers are standing behind me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful, beautiful invitation and reminder for everyone listening. Thank you. It's time, my sisters, to elevate your mind, expand your feminine heart, explore your inner wisdom. Let's soar together. Sending you all big, big love.
This is Story Studio Network.